also, I see Michelle and Devin and Barry, and I guess there's a lot of Michelles on the Zoom today. Michelle McCarthy as well. I don't yet see Lauren Shurtleff, John Greeley, Trinwin.
There's some technical difficulties also with the City Hall Wi-Fi. They're all in City Hall as well, so they're rebooting and they will be back in a moment. We'll be here in a moment.
Got it. We're all having related challenges. Okay, excellent. There's Lauren.
Councilor Trin had a previous commitment, so she is not on today, but I'll be here for the Office of Workforce Development if there's any questions.
Great, lovely to see you, Katie. Katie, sorry, can you give me your title from OWD?
Yes, I'm the Deputy Director for Workforce and Policy Development.
All right, and on the BPDA side, are we just waiting on John? Anyone, BPDA?
I think that's right, Counselor, but Michelle's giving our opening statement, so we can probably get started.
Okay, I'm gonna wait 1 second. Oh, great. Sorry about that. Sorry, everyone. It's just much better for me to do it from this computer. All right. I think we are ready to get going. Carrie, are we ready?
Ready to go when you are, Madam Chair.
Great. Excellent. I'm calling this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee to order. For the record, my name is Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the Council's Ways and Means Chair. This hearing is being recorded. It's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and also broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. This is actually the last of a series of 35 departmental working sessions and hearings that the Council has held as part of our initial budget review process on the proposed FY22 budget. Today's focus will be the Boston Planning and Development Agency, which is not technically included in the city's operating budget. It has its own budget and somewhat separate budgetary authority and everything set up through state statute. But the BPDA's capital budget does appear in our budget books, and obviously its work is very important to the Council and the city, we're grateful several years back to have sort of worked out an arrangement with the agency to have them appear as part of our budget scrutiny process, even though their budget calendar is slightly different, and so we do always do this hearing towards the end because they do budget formation a little bit later than the rest of the city. Before we turn to them, I just want to say, if you're a member of the public watching, we still would love to have your public testimony. You can come join us in the Zoom today by going to boston.gov/budget-testify. You can also send us written testimony. So ccc.wm@boston.gov. That stands for Ways and Means, ccc.wm@boston.gov. You can send us your written testimony. Even though this is the last of the department hearings, there's still a ways to go in the council oversight of the budget. So we'll typically take a first set of votes on the budget next Wednesday. So definitely lots of opportunities still to make your voice heard, and we're grateful to everyone who has already, including the number of members of the public who joined us last night at our public testimony hearing. Today's hearing is on dockets 0524 to 0526, orders for the FY22 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for other post-employment benefits. Dockets 0527 to 0528, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations, and dockets 0529 to 0531, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. That's again the formal set of dockets that make up the city's proposed FY22 budget. Much of what we're discussing today with the Bpda is not actually included in those dockets, but is, as I already mentioned, on its own budget balance sheet. But we're grateful to be joined by many members of their staff, including Michelle Goldberg, the budget director, Devin Quirk, director of real estate, Jonathan Greeley, director of development review, Lauren Shurtleff, director of planning, Barry Reeves, director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Michelle McCarthy, the housing policy manager, and then also representing the Office of Workforce Development, we've got Katie Gall, the deputy director for workforce and policy development. Before I turn it over to the department, my colleagues joining us here today so far, thank you, Councillor Ed Flynn, District 2, Councillor Andrea Campbell, District 4, and Councillor Julia Mejia at large. And I think with that, and again, I think I gave this already, but just if folks do want to sign up to testify, go to boston.gov/budget-testify. And I know we've got a few folks signed up for the end of the hearing. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Michelle Goldberg. I should say the Bpda's Michelle Goldberg. This seems like a good moment to say that we have an exceptionally talented Michelle Goldberg at the Boston City Council, who is the chief budget point person for the City Council and is therefore behind the scenes. If it looks like we've actually looked at the budget book and dug into it and thinking the trains are running on time, it's because of Michelle's leadership and the excellent team she's got in Cora and Shane. So sorry, that's a sort of tangential shout out, but not tangential to the process that we've just been through for the last couple of months. So credit to our Michelle Goldberg, and now to the Bpda's Michelle Goldberg, Director of Budget. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair Bach. And indeed, Michelle A. Goldberg is quite wonderful. I'm Michelle R. Goldberg with the Boston Planning and Development Agency. Thank you for having us today and giving us the opportunity to work with you. Joining me for opening remarks is Barry Reeves, our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and Michelle McCarthy, our Housing Policy Manager. Also available for discussions later, as you mentioned, is Kathy Gao, who's our Deputy Director at the Office of Workforce Development, Lauren Shurtleff, our Director of Planning, Devin Quirk, Director of Real Estate, and Jonathan Greeley, Director of Development Review. I do have a few slides. May I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Just a minute to...
And I'll also ask Carrie if you could make me a co-host.
Okay, let me get this slideshow going here. Okay. Here. Trying to put it in first. Am I good here, team? Thumbs up, anyone? Go. Thank you. Great. So I will take you through a brief outline of our financial framework before we highlight our work on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and an update on our affirmatively furthering fair housing efforts. The Mayor's Office of Workforce Development is an innovative public agency within the Bpda that promotes economic self-sufficiency to ensure the full participation of all Boston residents in the city's economic future. And so they join us as well. As a self-sustaining agency. The Boston Planning and Development Agency is made up of 5 business units that interact through what is referred to as related party transactions. The units are comprised of 3 major business units: the Boston Redevelopment Authority, the Economic Development Industrial Corporation, which includes the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. We also have the Boston Industrial Development Financial Authority, and there are 2 501c3s, the Boston Local Development Corporation and Friends of Youth Opportunity Boston. Right now I'm showing you our sources and uses. Bpda revenue is derived from 2 main categories: our rental, leases, and parking, and our grants and donations category, with the remaining coming from sale of real estate and equity participation. For expenditures, personnel and benefits represent the largest category of expenses for the Bpda. Based on also our contractual services include the expenditures associated with OWD's community-based organization grants, and so the activity that OWD is engaged in is reflected there as well. We have our administrative expenses that include the basic things like technology and equipment, office supplies, and also in our contractual services is where you'll see our planning activity happening. Our property management category has experienced some fluctuation through the past few years. This is because there have been changes in the Government Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, rules, which have influenced our interpretation of our construction projects. And so when we talk about our asset needs and how we intend to address our infrastructure needs, we will sometimes be paying for those improvements through the operating budget. The first of those was the Building 108 demolition and remediation, and the Charlestown Navy Yard sinkhole.
project-specific strategies based on community-specific needs that will include hybrid in-hybrid person meetings, and the community of alternate meeting strategies such as telephone town halls or virtual meetings. These will engage community members whose voices have not been heard or whose input has been marginalized, as well as those experiencing mobility challenges, limitations on availability to family and work responsibilities, or language barriers. We'll also retune our in-person meetings by selecting venues and platforms that foster improved communication. Over the past several years, the Bpda has been focused on creating a more inclusive and community-focused public process, reviewing development projects, and participating in planning studies, including making sure non-English speaking individuals participate in meetings in a meaningful way. The Bpda formally adopted a language access plan earlier this year that requires proponents of projects undergoing large project review to create and implement a project-specific LMP to ensure that residents within the neighborhoods where the project is located will have language access and appropriate translation and interpretation. The agency will continue to promote public awareness of available materials and services on other languages besides English and prioritize outreach and promotion of agency events and culture-specific publications. Building community trust is essential for all our planning and development outreach efforts. Trust is used as a process rather than a single initiative, while encouraging a collaborative process that brings together different perspectives and prioritizes the data collection of residents and partner voices, particularly those representing marginalized populations. Thank you again for allowing me to share on the agency's PEI efforts. I will turn it over now to Michelle regarding Housing Policy Manager. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Hello. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of the councilors here today. For the record, my name is Michelle McCarthy, Bpda Housing Policy Manager. I'm here today to provide an update on the Bpda's implementation of the affirmatively furthering fair housing zoning amendments. In early 2021, alongside our partners in the City Council, Boston became the first major city in the nation to add fair housing requirements to its zoning code when the Bpda adopted affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements. The AFH zoning amendments now require developers in Boston to take substantial steps to mitigate displacement and increase access to housing to members of protected classes who may have been historically excluded from communities surrounding proposed developments. The AFH effective date was March 15, 2021. As of that date, developers proposing projects subject to Article 80B Large Project Review or Article 80C Land Development Area Review are now required to submit an AFH assessment form with their project notification forms. In order to complete the AFH assessment form, developers must review and reference two tools created by the Bpda Research Department with strong support from Councilor Bach and Councilor Edwards. The first tool shows relative levels of historical exclusion at and around the project site, while the second tool, that we're calling the Housing and Household Composition Community Profile Report, provides developers with 17 data points on the community within a quarter mile of the proposed project site and provides comparisons to the city as a whole. Broadly, the 17 data points can be grouped into the following categories: household characteristics, household income, unit sizes, household sizes, and race and ethnicity. Since the March 15th effective date, four projects subject to AFH have filed letters of intent. If and when these projects submit project notification forms, an AFH assessment form must be submitted as well per the new zoning amendments. Because no project subject to AFH has submitted project notification forms, we have yet to receive an AFH assessment form. Over the past 3 months, Bpda staff have met with Southern development teams with proposed projects that are not required to comply with AFH zoning amendments, but who have expressed an interest or who would substantially benefit from voluntary compliance with AFH requirements. We are actively working with these development teams to integrate the AFH process, including submission of the AFH assessment, into the review of these projects. We anticipate that the first AFH assessment form will come from projects seeking to voluntarily comply with AFH rather than from one of the 4 projects to date that are required to comply. Although we have yet to receive an AFH assessment, the Boston Interagency Fair Housing Development Committee, which was also established at AFH zoning amendments, and is tasked with reviewing the AFH components of the proposed projects and making recommendations to the Bpda board, has been meeting about twice per month since late January to discuss its role and function and familiarize itself with the tools and forms that it will review. During 2 of its early meetings, the committee was joined by both Councilor Edwards and Councilor Bach, where members had the opportunity to hear directly about the process and intent behind the AFH zoning amendments, which I think has helped to shape and ground its scope and purpose. Finally, I did want to note before we wrap up that there has been a great deal of national interest in Boston's leadership on AFH at all levels of government, including from the United States House Committee on Financial Services, at which Bpda staff presented on AFH implementation to some of its staffers in April. This concludes our remarks today, and we thank you for giving us the opportunity and look forward to your questions. That's it from us.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, we'll jump straight into councilor questions. So as usual, I will hold the line to the end. I should also note that right after I read the list of folks who were here, we were also joined by Councilor Brayden. So we'll start out with questions from Councilor Edlin. Councilor Edlin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Walker. Thank you to the Bpda team that is present. Thank you for your work and your leadership. I just I'll focus on 3 quick points. South Boston waterfront. We don't have basic city services here. We don't have a police station. We don't have a fire station. We don't have an ambulance. We don't have a public school. We don't have a library. I'm very concerned as the city opens up and the time for emergency vehicles getting here is going up. I'm very concerned there. We can build buildings well, but we're not planning for basic civic services. I'm a municipal city councilor, and I need a commitment from the Bpda that we're not going to ignore basic city services in the South Boston waterfront. This is life and death for my constituents, and I have to stand up for them and to advocate for them and fight for them. As we continue to plan, and when there's things that the Bpda board, I'm going to start asking at the board, where is the planning on basic city services in the South Boston waterfront? I don't know if someone could comment on that for me.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm happy to respond. For the record, I'm Devin Burke, Director of Real Estate at the agency. So I just want to say on behalf of the agency, we're very committed to using our own property to advance the city's municipal service needs. We're actively, as it comes to your district in the South Boston waterfront, we're actively pursuing an opportunity to install an EMS station in the Raymond Elkland and Marine Park to address the life safety concerns that you're raising. So that's being studied now, and something we're happy to support. At the same time, we're currently hosting the temporary branch library for Chinatown in China Trade Building, and as you know, we're working very hard to find a permanent home for a branch library. It also located in Chinatown on Bpda real estate. And I think I should also say that we're committed to doing this in other districts as well. We're currently working with Boston EMS to improve their station in Charlestown. It's currently on temporary space on Bpda real estate. We're working with a public-private partnership to expand that EMS station to a 2-bay EMS station and actually fund a significant portion of that through public-private partnerships. So I hear you loud and clear. That is certainly part of what we are committed to doing, and we're looking forward to working with you very closely in the weeks and months ahead on this.
Yeah, thank you, Devin. You've been very helpful. Thank you, Devin. And just as the district city councilor, the buck stops with me, and it's my responsibility to get it done. And that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to get an ambulance station down there and a fire station down there, because I'm the elected official that represents the area, and I'm not passing the buck to anybody. So I need to get that done, and I need to work with the Bpda to get it done as well in the mayor's office. Chinatown. I think we build a lot of great buildings in and around Chinatown. I don't think we're doing enough to keep our immigrant families in the community. I'm frustrated about it. I know the language access plan that you guys mentioned. I work on that with Mr. Brain. Mr. Brain is doing a great job in the Chinatown area for the Bpda. But, when we want to build major construction projects in Chinatown. The first question I ask is, what impact does this have on immigrant families in Chinatown? How are we going to make housing better for immigrant families and low-income people? I don't want to hear about life sciences unless I also hear about how we're helping the Asian population in Chinatown. Mr. Wheeler, I see Mr. Wheeler. What do you think, Jonathan?
Councilor, good morning, and for the record, my name is Jonathan Gurley, Director of Development Review with the Bpda. Councilor, I don't think there's any daylight between your sentiments just expressed and ours. We believe strongly in a thriving, vibrant Chinatown. We've done much planning around that. We've kind of viewed that with any developer proposals we've evaluated, although there are no proposals currently in the Chinatown neighborhood that we are dealing with on that front, but in the event that we get more in the future, the prioritization of affordable housing, good jobs for the community, and contextual development are all really important. And I'll just reiterate what Devin said earlier, because I know this is important for the Chinatown neighborhood too. We're also really committed to providing a thriving environment, permanent library location within the Chinatown neighborhood as well.
Yeah, right. The money is allocated for that, so that's critical. That's I mean, I would never support another peak project in the city if we needed a library in Chinatown, that's for sure. The residents waited for 50 years. Mayor Walsh made it a priority for him for us to get a library in Chinatown. This immigrant community desperately deserves a library in Chinatown. The final point, the South End. A lot of development going on there. Tremont, Harrison, Albany, other capital projects with the constant development. These capital improvements are often delayed, where the plans have to be modified, such as the Harrison Albany street design project. What can we do to better coordinate with city departments to make sure that when we're doing development, we're also looking at street designs and that the community knows all the potential changes?
Councilor, that's a great question. I think we have a pretty good track record of doing coordination with our friends in public works, transportation, and applicable state. I think good examples are some of the work that's happened down on Harrison Avenue for planning for a much more complete street that stretch between Harold and Berkeley. Also lots of coordination on things like the two-way extension of Washington Street was one way for a long time. So if there's any individual issue or concern you have, we're always happy to partner with you on it and make sure that that's prioritized. And I think that solution comes in concert with our friends and sister agencies. But I think it's a great point. And what I mentioned earlier, we are increasingly focused on the full scope of mobility. So it's not just about cars. And I know that's something you care about too. It's about pedestrians. It's about bikes. It's about bus access and making sure the Silver Line and other buses in that corridor are prioritized as well. So those are all things that thematically we care about significantly here at the agency, and from both planning and development lens, and want to work with you and the sister agencies on understanding that.
Thank you, Jonathan. One final quick question to Barry. Barry, do you have any senior person on senior staff on Bpda that speaks Cantonese Mandarin?
Councilor, we are actually actively working with both of our staff to determine who actually speaks those secondary languages. And so we'll have a complete roster that I can share with you at a later date.
Right. Does anyone know the answer to that? The senior staff that are here, does anyone know if one of your colleagues speaks Cantonese Mandarin?
Councilor, I can just add, I know that we used to have one member of planning staff, not necessarily in city leadership, but that's.
Our controller is bilingual as well. I believe it is Cantonese that she speaks. Her name is Lynn Quinn. I believe she falls in our top 20% as well. So she's been our controller for I think 2 years. She's our deputy controller before that. She's been with the agency for 15 years. She's an extraordinary asset of our organization.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have people that communicate Cantonese Mandarin. That's important.
So maybe we can make sure as we go forward, we can.
Maybe to your point, what I think helps is maybe it's kind of embarrassing is that as we have been rolling out our language access plan in the last couple of months, there's a focus on two different things. One is making sure we have a diverse competency of languages across the agency every single day, but also that we have a robust plan, project by project, initiative by initiative across the board, to ensure that we have inclusive language access and community-oriented process for every single thing we do, right? And that includes change, but the wide variety of languages that are spoken throughout the city of Boston. So it's something that's a huge priority, and something that Barry and his team are working every single day on. We've made tremendous progress in the last year since the last time we were talking to you in this budget session, and I think we're really excited about on some of the things we've been doing and seeing its very work unfold over the coming calendar and fiscal year.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, and the meeting language too. Thank you, Council, for no further questions.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn, and we will also joined by Councilor Lydia Edwards, to District 1. We're actually, I'm going to take a very brief recess. We've got a report that we're having pretty poor quality on the live stream, I think because of the internet issues in the building today. So there's one fix that involves me going and physically turning something on in the council chamber. So I'm going to recess this hearing for like 3-4 minutes. So if we could just stand by for a second, and then the next up it'll be Councilor Campbell. It's plugged in. It's one sec. I think I just turned on the mics over here. We're all good. Thanks. It looks like I'm ready. It's on.
testing 1, 1, 2.
I hear it, but it sounds like you're talking through gravel.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, Gary.
Testing 1, 2. Test 1, 2, 3. Is that better?
Sounds good, Gary.
Wait, say something again.
Thank you, Councilor Cleveland.
Yeah, so in the chamber, it has a
No problem.
but it might be fine. It sounds terrible on me, apparently. So, we don't think, I mean, I rebooted it. I'm gonna pull out the HTML, put it back in. It's weird. And you don't think if, right, so it's like if I tried logging myself in, is that worth a try? Wait, everyone can hear it, please don't say. Oh, now because I put it down and back up. Now it's asking me for other user. It's not here. Okay, it's in. You don't see it now, do you? Yeah. Right now it says nothing, but I'm going to restore. Oh, and then it says no internet. It can't load. It has a post page for a Zoom, but it can't load it. It says no internet. It can't load anything. So that's our problem. It says connect. No, it says connect to the internet. You're offline. So I think this is. can see it at least? Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can find the internet because it seems like it's not really. You know, anyone from Bpda listening in who has a friend in public facilities and wants to ask them to stop deconstructing City Hall for 2 hours, that might be the real solution here. Yeah, no, I know that. This is an intentional comment. Okay, I have it trying to connect again to COB employee. It says it's connected. Does it pop up for you? Okay, so wait, now is it, do you need me to do anything? Oh, amazing. All right. See you in a sec. All right, well, I know you all sort of came with us on that adventure. Carrie, are we good?
I sure hope so, Madam Chair, but let's give it a go.
Emily says it's not fixed. I'm just going to test. Can somebody from Bpda who's in the building say something?
Counselor, I can hear you.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to figure out how oh, great. It is fixed. Excellent. Live streaming and also on TV, and basically a confluence of things have made that challenging this morning. So I'm sorry, that's more than anyone needs to know, but we didn't feel like we should just continue the hearing with the live stream being super garbled. So I think it is up and running stronger now. So after a bit of a delay, we are now going to Councillor Campbell. Oh, sorry, I'm calling this hearing back to order, I should formally say. Councillor Campbell, are you there? I might have to text her and tell her we've come back.
I'm here.
Excellent. All right, we're back.
Thank you.
And better than ever. So.
God bless you and Carrie. God bless you all. This is awesome. So thank you so much. Thank you, of course, to the Bpda for your work, particularly during COVID. Not an easy time, so thank you all. I'll jump right into questions. Obviously, I'm sure other councils will get to this too. There is, and I'm sure folks at the Bpda have also heard this, considerable distrust in community with the BPDA. We get a lot of emails and calls with respect to lack of transparency, lack of information inequities, et cetera. So really happy with, frankly, Barry's new role and the work in that office and some great things that are moving the department forward. But one of the things I did want to flag is Lori Radwin sent an email, and it should be as part of the record for this council hearing, Councilor Bach. It had incredible detail, case studies. This is a constituent, a resident, around how to improve the BPDA. I think it's an incredible email. I am flagging it so that every person on this Zoom can take a look and really process her specific ideas. And sometimes people don't come with specific ideas on how to improve the agency. So I want to flag that because it would take a whole Zoom to go through it just to really talk through the good ideas in it. My questions. Some residents have asked, has the BPDA considered using tools such as Nextdoor, Universal Hub to share information with residents? Has the department considered listing all project-related meetings on the BPDA's website and posting meeting minutes? That's one question. The second is, how do we as an agency, or how does the agency, I should say, manage the list of civic associations to make sure you guys have the most up-to-date information? Who handles that? What does that look like? My last question, I guess two more and then I'll stop. Has the agency considered guidelines around the length of time a developer speaks at meetings so that residents and abutters can speak and ensure all their voices are heard? We're obviously doing virtual meetings. I think it's something we should continue hybrid, but that's a lot of concerns we've gotten from residents around not being heard at some of the meetings. And then the last question is, Barry, in your new leadership role, what have been some of the greatest lessons? Where do you think the department needs to go? If you could just talk a little bit more about your office's work, that would be great. Thank you.
So, Counselor, thank you so much for the opportunity to share. So I'll start with my office's role and what we've been able to accomplish. One of the things I think that when I've been able to assess over the past months I've been there, is the fact that we're doing a lot of amazing work in the DEI space. I think the team of leadership that we have understands the challenges that we have and how to accurately reflect the ability to engage the community and to ensure that we actually are creating equitable processes. So I believe that's one of the great works. But one of the lessons learned is that the ability to create a better dialogue between us and the community is something that we need to do better at and continue to strengthen in that role and that responsibility. This is why we're working with our community engagement managers to improve that space and ensure that we're doing so. One of the things that you highlighted is our relationships with our community and our community agent groups and agencies. So right now, my office is actually working on identifying those rosters and completing a complete roster of those lists so that way we can identify who they are, what they are, and then strengthen the relationships with them. I personally started meeting with a lot of the neighborhood groups and associations to introduce myself and to ensure that we have a healthy relationship between the agency and ourselves. So I think we're doing a lot of great work in that space. There's always more work to do, and I think the team that we have around us is up to the task of doing so.
And Counselor, I can follow up on some of the other points you asked about. Good to see you this morning. I'll take them in order. One was using tools like Nextdoor. Super open to it. We can certainly talk with our communications folks. I think we just activated, I know we use Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for a lot of stuff, but happy to kind of engage in other platforms, other software platforms that we know people are using in neighborhoods. And so if you have any good suggestions on it, feel free to pass them along. Also looking forward to seeing that email. Again, I think we are constantly tinkering with ways to better engage and make sure everybody knows what's going on. And so any feedback is good feedback. Next one was meetings on website. So every community meeting we have is on our website. And we also use some of those platforms to put it out there. And in terms of, we are also posting every meeting is now recorded. And posted to the website as well. And the chat function, the result of the chat or the Q&A function included with Zoom is also posted to the website. But again, any questions or thoughts on that, happy to engage in that as well. And the last piece on timelines, this is something that we try really, really hard to do to limit developers trying to run out the clock at a community meeting. We have the same frustrations. We want to get to the community dialogue. We're always trying to balance the right amount of sharing information on complex things versus getting to community dialogue. Our goal is to try to limit it to 30 minutes. I recognize that sometimes we do a better job than that than others, and we will continue to redouble our efforts to try to put developers on a clock when they're talking. I think we've made some good progress in that in the age of Zoom, but as we all know, and I'm guilty of that myself, sometimes people can run a little bit long when they're excited about sharing their stuff. So something we will absolutely continue to look at and try to limit.
I appreciate that, because we definitely want, obviously abutters and others to feel like they're heard as a way to rebuild trust, and particularly in with community who often feels unheard. And then the last was just around the civic associations. Who manages those lists to make sure they're updated, et cetera? I might have missed that part.
Counselor, that's my office. I am actually responsible for my office and stuff like that. So we're actually working on that effectively as we speak right now.
Okay, so feel free to connect at least with the civics in District 4. We maintain lists as well, so happy to be helpful to you and your team there, Barry. And I'm sure the gavel is going up any minute, so I can wait for the next round. Did I run out of time, Councilor Bach?
You actually have like a little under a minute left, but we're happy to
I'll pass it on. I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Councilor Mejia. Sorry, Councilor Campbell. Councilor Mejia is next, and then it'll be Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning all. I'm happy to be here, and I definitely have some questions. We've been hearing from a lot of our constituents about Article 80 process, particularly with impact advisory groups. People feel very strongly about making changes to the IAG process, including requiring the impact advisory groups to reflect neighborhoods better by bringing in more people into the process who have never been involved. Has the BPDA done any sort of audit of the IAG process to see how improvements can be made? We're also curious as how can we change the process throughout which abutters are notified. I'm particularly curious as to whether or not we have any data that we collect in terms like either attendance sheets. Is there a threshold for a number of participants that are participating in these meetings? A quota of sorts to ensure that, X amount of abutters and not just homeowners, but also the renters that live in the immediate area have a voice and a say. So I'd like to see some sort of like metrics in terms of how we're really quantifying what real community voice looks like. I'd love to know how we're defining stakeholders, depending on who you ask. Stakeholders are sometimes could just be the local businesses that live in the area, that are doing business in the area. Sometimes it's landlords who don't live in Boston that have no real stake in the city planning and development process. So I'm just curious about how can we redefine what a stakeholder is and hold ourselves accountable to that. And then I'm curious, what are the actionable goals that the BPDA team has around measuring success for your DEI efforts? That's for now. And then I may have some questions if I have any more time left.
Councilor, I'll answer a couple of articles. First of all, thank you for your questions this morning. I'll answer a couple of things that I think will kick it to Barry on the DE&I stuff. Just quickly, I know we had a hearing a few weeks ago with you on IAGs, and we're still sorting through that. But one thing we do agree with, and that we'd love to work with all councilors, actually all electeds on, is that we believe stakeholders has a very wide definition, right? And so we do not have any preference in terms of renter versus owner. I think we want to make sure that if you are a neighborhood stakeholder in a broadly defined way, if you have a stake in your neighborhood, if you care about this neighborhood, we want you involved in the process, both on an IAG and just as a general participant. So when we work with each office of electeds on nominations for IAGs, we are more than happy to get nominations from a wide range of backgrounds, a wide range of walks of life. And so when we talk with your office or any other office about that, we want to make sure that we're doing our best to reflect the neighborhood. In terms of abutter notices, I think there's a couple different things, right? There's the abutter notice process that happens with ZBA cases, right, that kind of fall below Article 80. But we're happy to talk with you about anything we should be doing. And I think this relates a little bit to Councillor Campbell's question before. What are the various tools we're doing to get information out? We use a wide variety of platforms, a wide variety of approaches. But if you've got good ideas that you've found successful in engaging your constituents across the city, Councillor, we'd love to hear it. I know Barry would love to hear it too, as he continues to think about how the agency engages broadly across the city. So then I'll let Barry handle the rest of the stuff, but I just wanted to
actually, before we send, doing this. Yeah, I know. Thank you, Jonathan. Before you send it over to Barry, I'm curious about metrics and data and how we are keeping accurate accounts of who are the folks that are showing up to these meetings, and how we're doing our due diligence and making sure that there is some sort of threshold in terms of how many people show up. Do they actually live in the neighborhood? Like, where's the data around that, and how can we strengthen that process?
So we have, in the pre-COVID times, we have sign-in sheets for every single meeting, so we're tracking everybody who comes. Worth noting, that's voluntary. We did not compel anybody to sign into a meeting if they didn't choose to or self-identify. Since COVID's happening, and since around 10 months ago, we shifted to all virtual meetings. Everybody who participates in a meeting is registered and included. So we know every single person who's participated in a community meeting over the past year, even more specifically than we did before. We do not have a quota for a number of residents that have to be in a community conversation. I think we focus more on making sure we have as much participation as possible.
Right. So when you capture data, are you getting like addresses? Do we know whether or not these folks actually live in the neighborhood that we're talking about?
I think we're always trying to balance, Counselor, asking for self-identifying. We usually ask for zip code, but also want to be sensitive to providing a bunch of PII or requiring a bunch of PII to participate in a conversation. We recognize that people who participate in community meetings come from a wide range of backgrounds, and their comfort level with sharing that information, as I would imagine, is mixed. And so we're always trying to find a way to get a good sense of who's there and why they're there, at the same time respecting elements of privacy for people who participate.
That's fair. I do think, though, that when we talk about transparency and accountability, that we need to figure out how we can ensure that those who are most impacted are actually showing up, and that we're holding ourselves accountable to some sort of standard in regards to that. And then I know before we send it over to Barry, just kind of staying on this, is there any way, I believe you said that you post the minutes from the meeting? And I'd love to know if there's a way for us to be more public about some of this information. So like as soon as a meeting happens, that there's information shared across several platforms on your website, and there is a way for folks to weigh in even if they didn't participate in the meeting, because I do feel like that a lot of folks are feeling unheard and unseen. And when I think about planning and development, it just always seems to be developer focused, and people tend to be an afterthought. So I think that we need to revise the whole entire way we do business in the planning and development space. So I'm encouraged by the efforts that you all are making, and look forward to figuring out how we can make this more transparent.
Councilor, I would just say before we shift over to Barry, from a development perspective, right? Don't forget that there is an element of private property owners coming to the Bpda and then the public to ask permission to do things with their land, right? And so there will be elements that developers are involved in those conversations. We go to great lengths to make sure that every single thing that happens is advertised ahead of time. We've implemented, in terms of impacted, we've implemented in the last 3 months, both the language access plan, which is brand new, and the fair housing work that I know a number of you worked on the council with us in partnership, to make sure that we are having inclusive conversations and we're talking about both direct and indirect impact. In terms of the records of meetings, again, every single meeting that we have held since July of last year is when we started doing virtual community meetings has been posted to the website. and then any chat or Q&A as part of that meeting that's associated with the recording is also posted as well. That's generally posted within 24 hours. And so we're working really hard to make that. I think, again, maybe to Councilor Campbell's point earlier about exploring other software tools, I'd make the same offer to you. And also questions, are we missing a civic group? Are we missing just a group of concerned citizens? Do people want to hear from us directly? Again, we want to leave no stone unturned, and we are sponges for feedback, both positive and negative. So we're happy to work with you on any of those things.
Barry, I see the gavel, but you got like 30 seconds to answer the question.
Yeah, Barry, I'll let Barry weigh in, but then, yeah.
So just real quick, Council, to your point, I think one of you asked for at least the BDI focus, the two focuses that we've really been focused on for the last couple of months is actually our community engagement. And like Jonathan said, I want to kind of regurgitate what he already said. So we're actually working on more effective ways and platforms to how we do community engagement to ensure clear identification of stakeholdership and how we use language access to improve our relationships and connectivity toward the community. So we're really proud of the efforts that we're making, but we, like I said, we would love to hear more feedback on how we can do better in that space as well.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Thank you all. That's all for me. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Flaherty, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me start off by thanking all the folks that are on here from the BRA and the great work that they've done throughout the pandemic, wearing multiple hats. I was speaking regularly with Director Golden, along with Mike Christopher and Jonathan Greeley throughout the pandemic, dealing obviously with neighborhood development issues across the city, some that were sort of slightly put on hold, and then to see them transition and wear multiple hats, particularly on the food distribution side, as well as the PPE delivery side. So hats off to the great work that they all did as a unit, working obviously under the Walsh administration to make sure that we were making, obviously protecting the public throughout the pandemic, but make sure that food was getting to, particularly culturally competent food was getting to the places they needed. I know personally I was dealing with a lot of our nonprofits that were servicing our seniors and our most vulnerable residents, and I was calling Director Golden and Mike Christopher and Jonathan regularly to make sure that food was getting to where it needed to go. So that effort was phenomenal. So it was a tremendous lift. And so I want to thank the folks of the BRA for their effort on that front. I call it the BRA because we still have some unfinished business. We need to address the Enabling Act of 1956, section chapter 665. So I'll call it the BRA instead of getting into a long-winded doing business as the Bpda. So at some point, if you want to remain the Bpda, if you guys want to come to the council, we can get a home rule petition turned around and kind of tidy up that front there. Want to also address some issues. Obviously, my council colleagues, particularly the newer members, don't realize how bad it was under previous administrations and previous BRAs. This BRA under Director Golden under the Walsh administration, not only have they been the busiest with a tremendous amount of development and planning going on, but they've also their communication with this body, with the council, has improved tremendously. And again, folks that are new to the council wouldn't realize the stark difference that it is. So I appreciate that effort. And are we perfect? Nope. Can we continue to do that? Absolutely. And also it's up to us as council is to make those efforts as well, to reach out, to build those relationships. And I think folks on this panel will know that I'm not bashful about reaching out on a particular project on behalf of a neighborhood or a direct abutter to get to the scoop as to what's going on and what the process is. So on that front, a shout out to Teresa Polhemus, who does a great work, obviously advocating for the BRA on the board and keeping councilors abreast of making sure that we're accommodated when we're offering testimony at public hearings. If we could touch base on just the volume over the last several years, whether it's in dollars or square footage, and also the number of planning efforts that are going on, because I think that gets lost here. While the pandemic was happening, you guys continued to address development and planning. So if we get a sheer dollar amount as to the amount of square feet and or the amount of development dollars that are coming in, the role that will play in keeping our city on track when other cities will be struggling, we hopefully, because of our natural strengths, our colleges, our universities, our financial services, but also having a development arm that continues to move projects forward and keeps people working and continues to build housing. If you can put that into context as briefly as possible, I would appreciate that. And also kudos to the team. Marine Industrial Park is really, Ray Flynn Marine Industrial Park is really starting to take shape after years of planning and working with the local elected officials and the major stakeholders down there, we were able to lift up some of the uses to provide a diversity of services and businesses there. But the core and the crux of keeping it marine and industrial, freight forwarding, cold storage, seafood processing, trucks servicing, obviously the container ships that are coming in, as well as our cruise port. It's great to see down there, and soon to see our ship repair be reactivated. I think there's like a crane down there that looks like it belongs in the McHale's Navy, but I know that help is on the way. Congressman Lynch has done a huge heavy lift on that to secure federal funds for that. And also moving forward to let you folks know that there's a new committee on the council to deal with the COVID relief funds. I will be chairing on behalf of my colleagues, working closely with our president and Chair Bark and other committee chairs to make sure that those resources are getting to where they're needed the most. So I would implore that we start to have those discussions sooner rather than later to find out where we could use those funds. So that's it in a nutshell. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, but if you can kind of just give a snapshot for my colleagues as well as those that are tuned into just the sheer volume of permits and projects that you guys are dealing with, as well as the planning process. I think that will give a huge perspective, because I've had a front row seat for a while here, and I have to say that under Director Golden, this BRA has been the most communicative with this body. And again, probably not solace to new members, but I can't even begin to tell you what it used to be like under the Walsh administration. That changed, and we obviously appreciate that effort and that partnership. Clearly, we have more work to do to make sure that we're as accessible and as transparent, and make sure that that process, be it the IAG process, which, by the way, councilors make recommendations based on feedback from the community, as well as community leaders, to make sure that we have folks that want to serve and want to attend those meetings and want to advocate and make sure they're protecting their community and their neighborhood. So the onus is, I think, on members of the council to make sure that they're selecting wisely on these IAG projects, or making those recommendations to the BRA for who they think would be the appropriate person in that neighborhood from that community to serve in that capacity. So that's it in a nutshell. A couple questions in more of an opine, but I appreciate the attention to detail that you guys are providing, our planning and development arm in the city.
So I guess I'll start. Thank you very much for those comments and questions, Councillor. I think this is my first time speaking, so I will just let everybody know I'm Lauren Shurtleff. I'm the BPDA's Director of Planning. I'll start with the planning, and then I'll probably turn it over to John for some of the development numbers. But I will just kind of even back up to kind of echo a little bit of what you're talking about, Councillor, and that in the last 8 years, we've actually expanded the number of planning staff that's dedicated to planning as well, from just over around 30 to just over 50 right now. And I can assure you, each year I am asking for more staff to continue to do the planning work that we all find really critical and able to eventually enable the further build out of the city. Currently, we have about a dozen kind of full-scale planning initiatives that are actively underway. But if you also add all of the other smaller initiatives, and then you add the different planning that others are leading, maybe say it's BTD leading it or Public Works, but that our staff is also dedicated to, it gets to over 30. I have a really long list of things to kind of keep track of and check in with staff on a regular basis. Obviously, COVID has been a real challenge for us, but I think it's also been a growth opportunity in the sense of actually getting input on all of those plans. So we've been really focused on that, and just again, kind of leaning into the moment and seeing more participation as we, move through all of our plans. I mean, I always have a map. It's really helpful to be back in the office sometimes. But even just to list some of them, we have Plan East Boston, we have Plan Mattapan, Plan Newmarket, Plan Downtown. You mentioned the Marine Park. Well, we're actually working with the state to update that master plan right now so that we can secure the future that you're talking about for the park. We also have Plan Charlestown. I don't think I mentioned that one. We have a number of transportation studies, many of which are in the South Boston area. So we have one for the Seaport, for the Strategic Transit Plan. We also have Plan South Boston.as Transportation Plan, which we're getting ready to release. Just last month, we finalized the Alston-Brighton mobility study. I could go on. I love talking about this stuff, but I think I've hopefully given everybody a breath of the amount of planning. And I see that Councillor Bach has her gavel up, so I will turn it over to John because I think he has the development numbers.
Councillor Flaherty, thanks for the kind words earlier. I would just share briefly, just mindful of time. Since 2014, the BPDA has approved approximately 86 million square feet of new development worth more than $43 billion. This includes approximately 45,000 new residential units, 9,800 of which are income restricted, and then more than 80,000 construction jobs. That's through the end of calendar 2020. I also know, I know that the new tax revenue element of that is significant. I just don't have those numbers at my fingertips. We're trying to dig it up. If I'm able to dig it up, or we're collectively able to dig it up over the course of this hearing, one of us will circle back on the question and share it with the group.
Great.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Madam.
Great, thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Next up is Councillor Braden, and then it'll be Councillor Edwards. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the folks here from the BPDA. I spend way too much of my life with you guys. But it is, thank you for all your great work. And, the big issue for us out in Alston-Brighton, I think, is that the sheer scale of what's happening is that the community is getting exhausted. It's been going on for about 10 years now, and people are really struggling to get their head around all the different pieces, moving parts of the of all the development that's happening. And it would be really helpful, I think, back to our previous conversation about a district-wide master plan, to really have a district-wide perspective, and because you can't build a couple of million square feet of development in North Alston and not have it affect the rest of the neighbourhood. It has a ripple effect through, across the district, especially because of transit issues. So I'm really making another pitch, and I will keep pitching until we hopefully get somewhere, is to really try and have a really comprehensive area-wide plan, acknowledging that we will focus on some corridors, but that we need to tie it all together with an area-wide plan. I also want to say thank you to the BPDA for taking our suggestion of having an executive summary at the front of a project PNF. Hopefully that will improve communications and decrease the level of frustration of our community members who want to get their head around what a project is without having to read 200 pages of pretty dense technical information. So apart from that, I just look forward to really exploring ways that we can continue to have a hybrid model for IAG meetings and public meetings on development. We found during the pandemic that many more people have been able to access the meetings because of the internet access. And so I'm thinking a hybrid model would be wonderful to explore. And I don't know what the technical challenges of that are, but it's something I really will strongly advocate for. Thank you.
Councillor, I would just say thanks for all your thanks for the kind words on the executive summary. That was something that came out of a conversation you and I had in this forum last year, and we took that suggestion to heart and have implemented that as in concert with our language access plan. So not only does every Article 80 large project now have an accompanying 4 or 5 page fact sheet that includes a summary of the project, but also some images and maps associated with the project. But that will also be translated into relevant non-English languages as well. So it's not just a tool for simplifying what can be complex projects, but also it's a tool for making sure we're being as inclusive as possible in our engagement. In terms of the hybrid meeting question, It's something we are just starting to grapple with. And I think one thing I would just say is that we are certainly going to use this summer, and I'm happy to have Lauren chime in on this after me, is use this summer as a chance to kind of test out some good old-fashioned site walks, planning bike rides, standing outside and talking about a project. I think when it gets towards, hopefully we're all a lot more comfortable being around people and the public health circumstances continue to improve, where we can get to a place where people feel comfortable gathering in a room again. I think the goal will be figuring out how do we create hybrid scenarios, both individually and collectively over the course of a process or an initiative that gives people a wide range of opportunities to safely, effectively, and inclusively engage. I would imagine we'll be coming to all of you for different methodologies for that. I know the City Council does lots of engagement as well, both in moments like this and out in your districts, or in the case of at-large councilors throughout the city. And so I think we're all going to be learning together. And so I think we look forward to engaging with each of you on best practices and sharing from across the country on how to do this.
Thanks, John. I would just add to that and reiterate that we are seeing greater participation through the virtual meeting method. It makes a lot of sense in the sense that you don't really have to, I always say this, you've probably heard me, Counselor, say this actually, but you don't have to go down to, the local school cafeteria from 6 to 8 at night. You can log in while you're cooking your dinner, while your kids are there. It just has really kind of broken a lot of barriers to access. That being said, we're still very much, aware of the fact that there is a digital divide. So I think, like John said, over the summer, we're really going to kind of put our heads together and try and figure out what is the better approach as we move forward when we can be together. But, we also recognize that this digital model is actually very useful. In terms of planning, obviously, I do owe you a follow-up phone call from our conversation just yesterday. And, continue to take it under advisement. Like I've said repeatedly, we totally understand the kind of pressure that Alston Brighton is facing. And we've identified specific corridors where we think there's additional planning beyond the Western Avenue corridor study, which I didn't mention in my last round. I guess I was teeing this up, right? But, completely on the same page in the sense of we want to have a plan before there is development, but also recognizing that we can't always. So again, continue looking forward to continuing the discussion with you. And I will be calling you soon.
Very good. Look forward to that. Madam Chair, is my time up?
It's just about elapsed, Councillor Brayden.
Okay, thank you. I will not have a gavel waved at me, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Edwards. All right.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Okay, great. Excellent. Councillor Edwards, you have the floor.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean, I had some technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
On my end too. My apologies. So I just wanted to follow up on some budgeting items and then also some parts of my district. So as you know, we negotiated a great deal, I think, in getting Suffolk Downs done. And part of that deal and part of the PDA and I think the cooperation agreement is $400,000 to be committed from the city to help with the newly to be formed trust or displacement or housing trust for East Boston. And I just want to make sure that that commitment's still real and that it's going to happen. Because I didn't see what page it is on in the budget, but maybe you can just confirm to me on that. I wanted to check in about your thoughts about increasing linkage. I know that you guys were part of working with the prior administration and helping to increase it already. I think 40%, keeping it at least up to modern, what it should have been, right? If it had been increasing along the way. But I think many of us still think there's room to grow. Same with IDP, what reforms. But I understand if you wanted to stick with linkage, that's okay, because IDP, we had a good conversation with DND, and I do know that they're interested in some forms of different measuring sticks and measuring applications for when it does kick in. Then I'll end with, as you may be aware, I recently filed a zoning amendment to remove the ZBA from the cannabis discussion. Specifically after the board has made its decision, that's the cannabis board, the newly formed cannabis board, I think it's a year old now, has made a decision to grant a license or not grant a license. I think at that point, an applicant should be able to go on to the CCC if they have their license / HCA. And I didn't know if the Bpda had an opinion about that or would be stepping in to provide an opinion about that. So those are my initial questions. Oh, and finally, this is just an accounting that I'd love to get, I think, on an annual basis from the Navy Yard. And income's brought in from the Navy Yards, either in the resale part of the Navy Yard or any income in general on Bpda land in District 1.
So, Counselor, I think there'll be 3 answers here. I'll just quickly, it'll be me, then Michelle on linkage IDP, and then Devin on the Navy Yard. So just quickly, the answer is yes. I was able to connect with budget after talking with your staff last night. Their understanding as well is $400,000 of city capital in the budget. I think it'll be in D&D's budget in support of rental relief for East Boston as part of the overall Suffolk Downs approval. So they were still working on that, but I was able to get that confirmed this morning.
Thank you.
Hello. With regard to linkage, just for the record, we did update linkage, 42% increase in February, and Bpda staff are currently working to update linkage again for July 1st based on a consumer price index formula. I'm happy to get back to you with more details once we have those.
Okay, so we're going to get another increase. We don't know how much, but it will be happening on July 1st.
Yep, doing the work now to look at the consumer price index formulas and just solidify those numbers with the Bpda research team. But coming along.
And on the Navy Yard, Counselor, absolutely yes, we'd be happy to share that accounting with you. I think the thing we get the most questions about, and I'm sure you get them too, is the 2% and 4% transfer fees on previously sold residential condos in the Navy Yard. On average, just to get the high level narrative, on average, annually, the income from that is about $500,000 a year. In terms of expenditure in the Navy Yard, it is significantly greater than that. We spend quite a bit of money, over $500,000 in maintenance, and then beyond that, there are large capital expenditures. So we're spending $8 million to tear down the dilapidated power plant. We spent $2 million this year on the Navy Yard sinkhole project, one of the sinkhole that we needed to repair that Michelle referenced earlier. So happy to share that. I also think it's important to recognize that the 2% and 4% the agency has committed since last year to fund Barry and team's diversity, equity, inclusion work as a dedicated funding source for that work.
Thank you. So now going a little bit into AFFH and specifically in my district. So thank you again for getting that done together. The team worked to make history. It's been effective as of the Ides of March, the 15th of March, for those who don't follow Roman history, I guess. Either way, so I just want to check in on that. So I know that it requires the new committee, I'll just call it the new committee, the interagency committee, to review public comments. However, there's no public comment process outlined besides what's already done for Article 80. So how are we integrating public comments on, let's say, once the historic displacement and the displacement analysis, historic exclusion and displacement analysis reports are up, and they put out their assessment tool. Where does the public get to comment and what space? I also am curious about the personnel support. Do you need more staff? I know Michelle's doing an amazing job, but it might be helpful to have another staffer to help coordinate research? I don't know. The the community and housing profile map website is really good. So compliments to whoever did that. However, a dynamic displacement risk analysis and mapping is lacking. So I'm just curious when that's going to be up. And then projects next to vacant land, water, or other underdeveloped land, I think might skew some of the results of your AFFH analysis. So how are you compensating for when there's like vacant land around there to help make sure that there's a true depiction of displacement and historic exclusion? So that's the AFFH kind of analysis. Just picking up on some things, as you know, with the ZBA reform and the executive order from the prior administration, we were looking to have a zoning amendment to lower the threshold for the LLC disclosures of ownership interests at the ZBA, and that was committed to do that. I don't know if you guys are working on that. ISD said you guys are working on that, so it would be great to know if you are, to make sure that we have that done. The executive order was assuring that things would be done by August of this year, 18 months from its signature. So again, this is for the LLCs that come before the ZBA. Right now, in a PDA, a large corporation that comes before you has to disclose its ownership interest, as you know, right? So we want the same disclosure at the LLC level, or excuse me, at the ZBA level for certain, non-investment properties or those who are developing around in our communities. So I'm wondering how that is going. I also wanted to make sure that there's some updates on Suffolk Downs and the HUD complaint that was filed, that was resolved. I'm making sure that the compliance is still going on for inclusion. And let's see. And finally, sorry, just making sure I have, your personnel and your Plan East Boston and Plan Charlestown, thank you both. Thank you for both. I know that they're both working very, very much, and you guys are getting a lot done. So I just wanted to commend you for that, say thank you, but also just to check, is there a specific budget or line item for the community engagement in either plan? That's it.
I can take the AFFH questions. Just with regard to the personnel, we're really using this time to take a look as we move through the final, the stages of implementation. And once we get a full roster of projects that are at various stages in the AFFH review process, to see what that looks like in terms of staffing needs. And as you noted, I'm really primarily responsible for the implementation. So I am very keenly aware of when I'm being stretched too thin with regard to the workload that might be coming my way. But as of yet, since we only have really 4 projects filing letters of intent that are required to comply with AFFH, and then another handful that we're working with for voluntary compliance, we've yet to receive the necessary documentation to be reviewed and assessed, which leads into kind of the answers to your next questions, is that as we're rolling out implementation, I think we're engaged in a lot of learning processes about how to best incorporate public comment and review periods into the process. And I think without real world examples of how that works, you can't really predict how that's going to work, aside from taking in all the public comments and making sure that the whole package of materials that are submitted via the Article 80 process, including public comments, the AFFH assessment form, and the housing and household composition community profile report, are reviewed thoroughly by the Boston Interagency Fair Housing Development Committee, and just making sure that they have the time and resources they need to look at that information, and then figure out, is there a better way to get the information they need to make an assessment and determination. And then I think you had a question about the report itself with regard to open land. We've been trying to figure that out as well, since the report looks at a 1/4-mile radius, and that goes different lengths of depth depending on where you're developing. So we're really working with these large PDAs that are in large projects that are coming in that may be voluntarily complying with AFFH at this point, because we haven't received any that need to comply, to look at kind of the perimeter of the project and to take a look at what works best with regard to getting the best information about the community, just to make sure that no one's kind of putting that red dot when you look at the profile report, like in the dead center of an uninhabited place. So, we're really looking at making sure that the report is pulling from data that is useful to look at the community, unless it's truly, an empty area to look at. But I think just being flexible with regard to taking a look at the report and really utilizing what the report has to say, even if that means putting that pin that generates the report in several different places at the project site. But more to come as we move through the implementation phases. And I hope that was all of your AFFH questions.
Just the public comment, how does the public comment?
So with regard to the public comment, it's just making sure that the information is available on the Bpda website as part of the PNF form, public comment via community meetings, and the regular public comment structure that already exists within Article 80, and trying to integrate that into the AFFH process.
I want to thank you so much. You and Sanal have been great, and I know that there are adjustments that are still to come. So I appreciate that, and we'll just continue to communicate. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks both to you and Councillor Bach for all of your work on this. I don't think that we would have been able to do it in such a short amount of time relative to the amount of time that things take in government world, if not for the community and political support. Yeah, so thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Edwards. I'll ask some questions now, and then we'll go back up to the top. So if there are councillors with second round questions.
Before you continue, I'll just follow up then with the other questions that I asked in this beyond the AFFH, because there were several in-district questions.
Sorry.
Time, but I did ask about in my district, and I don't know if you just would prefer that I write to them directly, or.
So, sorry, you asked questions, you already put the questions for the district on the record?
For example, the ZBA reforms and implementation, right. And then also my district questions about Suffolk Downs, and also the plan East Boston and Charlestown, and the budget for community engagement.
Yeah, so we're well past time, but I
can submit those. I will put them on record.
What I'll ask the group to do is just, if any of those questions, we did this yesterday when we had some that ran way over. If you want to put any answers, BPDA team, on the record when we come back around, even if Councillor Edwards isn't here, and then anything else will get followed up in written form, that'd be great.
Councillor Bach and Councillor Edwards, maybe just on the Suffolk Downs thing, I would just say that why don't we schedule a follow-up meeting between our team and your office, just to kind of, I think we've got a bunch of work on that on the IAG going forward. I did happen to talk to the development team last night. They are working really diligently on both the TAPA agreement and the Parks MOU. And so those are both in process with those respective public agencies. And so I think we could hopefully have an update on all three of those items, certainly well after this hearing, but we can do that at a staff level between you and I.
And then the ZBA disclosure you can answer on the next round, and we'll follow up with that language.
Great.
Perfect. I understand request for time.
No worries. Just want to make sure, that we get through everybody. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I guess my questions, and I'll keep myself honest here. First one is just a little bit of a check-in on a few zoning fronts. So the coastal flood resiliency zoning overlay districts and the zero net carbon building zoning initiative, where things are on those. I don't know if that's a Lauren.
Did you want me to just take it right now?
Yeah, sorry. Unlike my colleague, I think it's better if I just ask the questions, then we find out how much time I have. So, Councillor, Lauren, that'd be great.
That's totally fine. So for the zero net carbon zoning, as well as the Article 37 update to lower the threshold, that process is underway. And when I say underway, I know that there was a briefing for the City Council back in the fall, and we've had 22 public meetings since then. So that's moving well along. The idea would be that we would wrap the process up this fall and bring it to our board, and then the zoning commission hopefully sometime over the winter, which is really exciting because we're doing really great work there. In terms of the coastal flood resilience overlay, I think, I've got the guidelines from September of 2019, so we've got those in place. Those are board approved. We've taken that and put it into zoning language, which we released in December of 2020. We've had a number of public meetings to share the zoning text. And we also had a public comment period that wrapped up a couple months ago. Right now, our team is making revisions based on the public comments. I'm hoping to bring that to our board and onward to the zoning commission, probably in the next few months. Another, really exciting leading edge kind of process where, trying to figure out how do we advance building adaptation and protection so that we can confront the anticipated future sea level rise of 40 inches by 2070. So is that helpful?
Yeah, so wait, but sorry, just so I have clear time points in my head, the point at which we think I know there's been tremendous work on the carbon building initiative, but just the point at which we think we move to the next stage is when?
So when we wrap it up and actually bring it into the zoning should be within the next calendar year.
Okay.
Probably sooner.
You mean this calendar year?
Well, yeah, I mean,
you mean the next 12 months, but I'm hoping for the next 6.
That's what I'm saying is we can hope that we can wrap it up by December, but you know how that works. It could be February, but we're well on our way.
Okay. No, that's great. That's great to hear. Obviously, we're just eager to, I think we all know that sometimes things like linger in the guideline discussion space for a little bit longer than we wish. And
yeah, I mean, that is the goal though, is end of the year. It's just sometimes with, actual schedules lining up. That's what.
Okay, great.
The CFRAD would be well before then, within the next few months.
And then I know that there's some working group underway. It came up at our landmarks hearing on the Article 85 topic. And I think folks know I care quite a lot about that and just about sort of re-envisioning how we integrate historic preservation into our conversations earlier in ways that are more productive for all concerned. Where are we with that? What's the point at which that can become a public conversation?
So that one I would have to get back to you on. I know that, I have team members that are working on it. I just haven't had a chance to actually pop into one of the conversations yet. So I'm not really sure in terms of the timeline of when we can bring it public, but it remains very high on our Deputy Director for Regulatory Planning and Zoning, Brian Glasscock's order of priorities. So. Great.
Okay. Well, I would love to. I would love to loop in with you guys on that. It's something again that I'm quite focused on. And I'm glad the conversations are happening. That's great.
Yep.
And I'll leave to one side, Councilor O'Malley and I have filed a zoning amendment to remove parking minimums for all affordable housing developments. And that is something that I'm interested in discussing with the BPDA and that I hope the BPDA will be supportive of. I think obviously we've recently seen the parking minimums be used as a lever to block several really important affordable housing developments, but it's also notably in JP, well, also one in Dorchester, but I think that more broadly, it's like as I said to my council colleagues, we've got a major how do we get there from here problem on both affordable housing and climate resiliency. And this is a small step, but if we can't take this step and build transit-oriented, all affordable housing without getting hung up on the parking minimums, then we're definitely not getting there from here on either of those crises. So, but having said that, I know we're going to be having a hearing on that in the pretty near future. So and I know Brian isn't with us today, but just would love the agency's, attention and support on that front. And thank you for the update on the AFFH. I had sent over questions about that and obviously have appreciated working closely with the team throughout the process. And thanks, Michelle, for all your work and Sonal and lots of folks who are not on this call, but have really done a lot to get us there. And I do love using the tool online for the quick data analysis. But obviously, I think it'll continue to be something that Councilor Edwards and I and the whole council are really interested in. And there will be bumps along the way in implementation, and we're all kind of partners in that endeavor. But it's great, Barry, to have you on board as well and kind of thinking about that angle for the whole agency. I guess a broader question I have, and I think it's probably a Devin question, is, So this is also a hearing order that I filed, and we'll have a longer conversation about it when I have a chance to have the hearing. It's been all budget hearings all the time. But since I have you, I'm pretty interested in how we use the BPDA's urban renewal tools for the public good, and think about, the BPDA can acquire land, and famously, obviously, did the transaction that set us up with the Dudley Square Neighborhood Initiative. And as we think about land trust, as we think about the possibility for like social housing and other things that are like economic operations, but would actually be for the public good, the city as an entity is less able to acquire, own, and deal in such things than the Planning and Development Agency is, because of the statute that Michael mentioned before. And I'm really interested in us being more robust on that front in support of kind of core public goods. And I would love to hear, Devin, a little bit about what things you guys are doing that sort of feel like stretching the tools in that direction already, what innovations we've had in terms of, there's some famous long-term ground leases that we're pretty frustrated by. I think it's public knowledge that the Faneuil Hall one is one of them. But I just, thinking about how we're shifting to using those tools on behalf of the public to sort of creative framing of ground leases and other things in the public interest. Would love to just hear a little bit about where the agency is on that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, Counselor. That's great. Happy to start, and there's a lot to that we can unpack in further sessions or go deeper here if there's time. I think maybe one place to start is that the BPDA is unique in that we are both the regulatory planning and development agency for the city, but we're also a major landholder, and that means that we can actually pilot things on the fact that we own land means we can pilot things on our real estate and do things that are maybe what we want to see the private real estate market do in the future, or we want to sort of lead the way, lead by example. I think a big part of that, obviously, is our commitment to using our land for affordable housing creation. I would point to Nubian Square and everything we're doing there and under Plan Nubian Square led a planning process that's with the community, and the community said very loudly and clearly to us, we want a third of all new housing units created to be deeply affordable, a third to be income restricted, and a third to be market. And because we own so much land, we're able to go ahead and implement that in a way that it isn't possible to do on private land. When it comes to the actual tools of urban renewal and powers of the agency, I think we can do things that the city itself, under its municipal powers, cannot do. The city has to acquire land for municipal purpose only. And a recent example of where we've participated in the real estate market as a economic and community development agency is in Walter Street in Roslindale, where there was a piece of land that the Parks Department really wanted to acquire for conservation purposes. This was adjacent to a wetland, and they have the power to do that. And there's also a couple of housing units next door that if the Parks Department acquired that, they would have had to tear them down, or they could not maintain that, as they didn't have a power to acquire land for affordable housing. That's just not something the city can do. So we stepped in, worked really closely with D&D and the Parks Department, and directly negotiated over the course of about 60 days a purchase from the private actor that was controlling both properties, brought that to a close, and I think it just came before you recently for a transfer to the Conservation Commission. But we have an RFP that just came out, actually just came back now. There are two different entities interested in building affordable housing on that site as well. So and it's a unique example, but it's something where the BPDA was able to step in and do something that's very much in the public interest that the city couldn't do under its regular powers and authority. And we're very interested in looking for more opportunities to do things like that as they arise.
Great. Yeah, no, I thought that was a great example, Walter Street. And I just think I think there are ways we could do it at grander scale, and also, right, like if we were doing it frequently, more efficiently, like not to knock the efficiency, but just like it's always harder when it's like a one-off than if it's something that we, as we think about the parcel priority process and the park side, I'm sure that this kind of thing is going to come up more, where it's not as neat and tidy as a parcel that's only going to be for urban wilds. It's a parcel with urban wilds and something else, or whatever. So, yeah.
Completely agree with you. And I think we just want to be mindful that we're involved in community process in any action we take. I think we want to reflect on our history and some of the downsides of urban renewal and some of the less socially just outcomes, but at the same time, look forward to how we can use these tools in the public interest going forward, and would love to have a more robust conversation around that.
Yeah, well, and I've heard a lot of support on the housing side at the council for a robust AOP program over at D&D. Sorry, that's the Acquisition Opportunity Program for folks not in the acronym soup, which is basically like, the places where we might be losing some housing that's affordable right now. It might be at risk of being converted, and instead we want to kind of stabilize it, and there might be a city acquisition involved there. And I mean, most of what D&D does there is to try to supply funding to help somebody else acquire. But there are times when that kind of a process is just going to move too slowly to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And so thinking about how we, especially if we end up using federal funds to robustly grow the AOP program, which I think we should, then thinking about how to use the BPDA's mechanisms to effectively execute on that, so that we're not, especially in the crazy real estate market we're in right now, so that we don't lose opportunities, seems really important to me.
And and ground leases are our business model too. We have some property that we operate, and for the most part, that's operated with very community development centric vision. With vast majority of our tenants are Boston-based businesses, huge minority business participation. So if we own something, we can take that lens to operating property. And then as we're renegotiating ground leases, I mean, that keeps the public sector involved in the future of the property in perpetuity. And so we will have the opportunity to renegotiate some ground leases from the 70s, hopefully in the near future, and we can take a different sort of perspective to those. And if we use acquisitions in the future, we can take that same lens to how we might redevelop property.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think setting up our ground leases both so that the uses on them are serving the public good, and then to the extent that they're generating revenue, the public's getting a share of that. I'm a huge fan of the fact that we get our 2% and 4% when people resell former BPDA properties, because frankly, it's just a version of the 2% transfer tax that Councilor Edwards and now Mayor Janey and others push through the council, and that I'm very supportive of. I mean, it's, at a localized level, it's kind of saying, hey, when values are going up, there needs to be some public give back that helps us, continue to do the things that frankly we do on the public side to create value for all these private actors. So I'm very supportive of those types of models. Before, I have a couple more budget questions, but I want to see Councilor Mejia. Did you have second round questions that you wanted to ask? Let me just check with her. The quality of City Hall internet today, I feel like it's like we're getting the ship into port on the department hearings just in time here, just as the boards start falling off. All right, well, okay, I think she's all set, she says. So I'll just, before I ask a few more questions, did anybody have an answer ready to Councilor Edwards' question on the ZBA front?
So I can definitely speak to both Plan East Boston and Plan Charlestown. The answer in terms of do we have a line item in the budget for community engagement, and the answer is no, we do not. We are now, as we have currently, I think 5 community engagement managers. We're looking to expand that team, so we're doing all of that work in-house now. That being said, we're always looking, obviously, to improve our engagement, increase our engagement. But the answer is there is no specific budget item in those, either of those plans. And then I think that she had another question about the LLC thing, which I'm just not familiar with, so we'll have to get back to her on.
Okay, all right, so the LLC front we'll circle back on. Okay. And I did want to also note on the Lauren, I did appreciate the sort of maps and other appendix slides that you sent over on the zero net carbon building zoning and the coastal flood zone resiliency zoning overlay. We'll make sure those get posted as well. On the budget front, I was wondering if you guys could speak to a little bit how dependent we are on parking in the BPDA revenue. Like what degree of it is parking?
Sure. So I can answer that, I believe. So of our budget, 60 to $70 million, depending on where we are in a year, about 9 to 10 million of that is parking. I do think that we consider that direct operating funds that, should be kind of like the first dollars that we spend, so to speak. But we have a pretty diverse funding stream. And so I think, Devin can speak to this as well, as our tenants are doing their own return to work plans. We understand the impact of autonomous vehicles. And so we're very curious about the future of parking. And, but we certainly, it's not our only funding stream, if that answers the question. Devin, do you have thoughts on?
I think maybe one thing I would add is we have, I think, 5 different revenue generating parking lots, but the big one, where the majority of the parking funds come, is in the built parking garage in the marine park. Everything else is open lots. So the open lot spaces may over time be better utilized as other things. The garage is actually, I think, from a public policy perspective, beyond being a revenue generator, is also it's pretty solid foundational planning, and credit to the generations of marine park planners that came before us that said, hey, a centralized parking model is probably better for this district, and allows the BPDA to control both parking demand and accessibility over the long term. And the number of parking spaces in South Boston is capped by the EPA mandated parking freeze. So I think as a planning agency, we don't want to be dependent on parking revenue, but well over half of our parking revenue comes from the garage in the marine park, which I think is a fairly good example of done, structured, centrally managed parking.
Okay, no, that's great to understand, and it's good to know that it's more than half from there. I'm slightly scarred, and I can tell it's a scar because as I say it, I think I might have mentioned it in last year's BPDA budget hearing, but I went to an initial meeting as a mere community member in like 2015 on the lot that borders Bay Village and Chinatown. And at the time, there was a BPDA person in the room who was very clear on the fact that, like, no matter what we did, it was like, oh, this property, it has this easement where you have to be able to cross through it. And we're also, obviously we were talking about the library at the time, we were talking about housing. And then the BPDA person was like, and it has to generate the same amount of parking revenue as it does for us now. And that was, and I think we talked about this before, because I remember you saying, oh, the agency would not say that today. That's not where we are. But just as somebody who is constantly trying to move us towards better uses in downtown neighborhoods, just that degree of dependency on parking still worries me a bit. And especially, and you made the right distinction, right, Devin, especially those service area lots where we might think about public uses going forward.
Yeah, and if I can, the 290 Tremont Street example, I think what's important for us to articulate is that we are willing, able, and frequently do sell property below market rate to support community development, but we are emphatically against giving away property to private developers to enhance their bottom line. And we think that all the real estate value in the BPDA's property holdings needs to accrue to the public interest. So I mean, maybe benefit of the doubt that was perhaps what a previous colleague might have been trying to say, that we're not interested in subsidizing private development, but we are very interested in subsidizing public development.
Great. And can you speak to me a little bit about on the BPDA capital side, what capital, like, is it on this graph that you have where you say public works construction, that 11.2%? Is that on our City of Boston books? Is that what public works construction means? No.
Michelle probably can speak more articulately to this.
Or is that, but that's the type of use?
Yeah, exactly. We own and operate the roadways in the marine park, and therefore operate as a public works department in that area and doing public works type construction, roadway improvements, etc.
Got it. Okay. But if I'm sorry, I'm just looking at.
Yes, so on our slide here, the Bpda real estate capital needs, we've got this categorized by procurement law. We are trying to approach our projects, with that in mind and try to organize and group in that way. And so that's just our way of referring to road improvements. And so if we were to go through our portfolio, there's a lot of investment that we would need to get the parks up to ADA code, and it includes street lights and all of those types of projects. And as we start to move into sinkholes and pier repairs, it's less of a vertical construction and more horizontal construction. And so as we, if you were to look at a long-term glimpse at our portfolio, we, for about 4 or 5 years, we were very focused on China trade and did an awful lot of 149 construction, and now we are experiencing a lot more public works style projects, and so that's our way of trying to reflect that.
Got it. And it looks to me, flipping through our budget book, like you guys aren't actually asking for any city capital authorization this year.
So we did not receive any new funding. They are continuing to fund projects previously approved. We had submitted a request. Not funded at this time, and we're hopeful that in the next few cycles, we can keep moving. We're very grateful for the projects that we have, particularly our Northern Ave investments, and so we're excited to get those procured and moving as well.
Yeah, and how do you think? I mean, I have to confess that with my Ways and Means hat on, I'm like somewhat glad that there's no new authorization, only because I sort of think it's like, I mean, there are many respects in which the agency, I think, is glad to be every tub on its own bottom. And it seems to me like I've never been clear on the basis on which some projects came across onto the city capital budget. And I don't know, Devin, if you want to speak to what that basis is when you guys request it.
I think probably the best example of what I think we would promote as a very appropriate city funded project are these street improvements, because one of our objectives is honestly to exit the business of running a small public works department and transfer those streets to the city, but the city's will not accept those streets as public rights of way until they meet certain standards. So we're asking for, and have received some help to do that. And of course, we funded the vast majority of it on our own, but with some city funding, we can help get to that goal faster.
Got it. And so that's an active plan, is to get those streets up to snuff so they can be transferred over. And
yes, yeah, and we articulate that as in any meetings with any developers or other entities in the marine park. We are following the Public Improvement Commission's guidelines for streets and right-of-ways, and having them run any ideas or changes by the PIC in order to facilitate that change in the future.
Got it. Okay, that's great. I will say that obviously, if we were to acquire a bunch of land for socially owned housing, I would be supportive of city capital support for associated public works type work. So just wanted to flag that. Okay, and your budget formally introduced to the board when?
Next Thursday, June 10th.
Okay. And I guess I would ask, I understand that the timing is always, seems to always be awkward in this way. But I would be grateful if you guys would sort of send over to us. I know that I could go find it and download it, but if you would send over sort of formally to the committee, the things that you file once they're filed with the board, so that we've got the FY22 budget just as a sort of point of information thing. And is there anything, Michelle, that you can say to kind of like where that's going in terms of major, like anything kind of significant about how it's going to be different in the coming year than it was in the prior?
Sure. So, we have spent several years focusing from a finance perspective on our internal operations, preparing for the disparity study, building out our reporting structure in a way that will allow us to better reflect where the dollars are going. We run into a very unique dynamic when we do have to operate as the BRA and the EDIC from a legal entity's point of view. And so when we are actually going out and initiating contracts and engaging in the procurement space, we have a lot of internal governance and a lot of technical processes that we needed to flesh out, simplify, document, and get our house in order in that way. So we're providing reports to department heads at a greater level of detail than we've ever been able to before. And so I think where we are trying to go is to make sure, like you said, that the revenue streams that we have, we can very clearly tie them to the programs and activities that we're supporting. And so going forward, I think we are trying to get clearer at when a construction project is ready to go. I think we sometimes hope that things happen a little faster than they really do. So that's where we're going, I think, is trying to figure out how can we look into the future better. We're going to try to put together a buying plan so that our community engagement staff can go out and say, hey, well, here's this $450 million and here are the actual projects that it means. If you want to do design, here's the list of projects. Let's go get you certified. Let's talk to the city about programs and training, et cetera. So I think that what we're trying to do is make sure that the staff that we have on file have the tools and resources to execute on all of the various activities that we're engaged in. We are, looking at outside support and when we do things in-house, just to make sure, like Lauren said, that if there's something as important as community engagement, that, we're building out the staff to do that internally. We're supporting Barry to make sure that we're giving him the resources that he needs. So we're going to see a lot of growth in that area. And I think we're also hopeful, Katie, maybe you could jump in and give OWD a quick plug here, but, we're really hopeful that, some of the work that we've done here is going to put OWD in a better position to leverage all of their grants and make sure that any additional funding that the organization might need, that they get supported first before we do any of our other initiatives. So we're hoping that the budget can really be a management tool for us to communicate better. And so that's part of why we come to you here also is that discipline and conversation of hearing what's important and then integrating it on an annual basis into what we're doing.
Great, thank you for that overview. And yes, I would love to hear from Katie. I was also going to ask her a question just so that we hear from OWD. But Katie, if you want to weigh in on what Michelle just said.
No, I mean, thanks. I think we're talking a lot locally about the sort of distribution of job training programs across the city. And it's really interesting. I feel like I've learned a lot in the last couple of hours and listening in. So it's been great to be a fly on the wall for that. We work very closely with all of our funded partners and with other sort of workforce funders in the city to understand the dynamics of what's happening. And I'll say that the pivot to remote training for so many of our providers has been really fascinating just to see like what programs are taking away from that. So, definitely we're at like a very fruitful moment for workforce development. There's a lot of need and there's a lot of people rethinking the way that they've done things for a long time. So both of those are really exciting conversations to follow and just to braid together with the understanding of where development is happening across the city.
And can you speak a little bit, Katie, to the Office of Workforce Development? Now, your formal budget comes entirely through EDIC, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. I think that, as Michelle pointed out in her opening remarks, the linkage amounts are not covered in that. So I think what's not included is we in the last fiscal year, obligated just over $5 million in neighborhood jobs trust linkage funds. So that would not be included, but other than that, yes.
Got it. And so you obligated 5. How much is sitting in the neighborhood jobs trust unobligated right now?
That is I could pull that up. We do have, we work with Treasury to manage those funds. And so it does fluctuate a little bit from quarter to quarter. Right now, our uncommitted funds balance as of February was about $3.5 million. Not an unexpected amount for this time of year, since we will be going into our procurement cycle for neighborhood jobs trust grantees and releasing requests for proposals this summer. So expect that figure to go down, but that's what we have as of February. So,
got it. And how is OWD involved? I mean, sort of like, I know that you are involved, but in the conversations around the ARP funds and kind of, you know, thinking about because I'd say we've had a variety. So this is the last, right, of these departmental budget hearings. And on our tour through the departments, there's an awful lot of departments who are trying to think about a job training piece. So there's like, you know, environment sitting with $1 million for green jobs. Then you've got the hard hit industries, $1 million. Then you've got the arts and culture one. And a lot of these are departments with high expertise in the area of substance that they are working in, but not necessarily expertise in job training and pipeline programs. And so I'm kind of trying to understand, and all those things are information. And there's no shame in that. The ARP was passed in mid-March, right? Like, we're all building this, you know, bicycle as we ride it. But I think it has been a little bit of a flag for me that it feels like some of those departments could use really active partnership with folks who think about workforce development stuff all the time. So I want to know where that set of conversations is.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, we're building on longer term conversations that extend well pre-COVID. So we have been, for example, meeting with the Environment Department on a monthly basis for the last year and a half or so to talk about green jobs and green jobs training, and have developed sort of a set of policy principle, like priorities that we want to advance. So as the funding becomes available, if it does in fact become available, then that, you know, can hopefully track with the sort of strategic planning that we've been doing all along. A lot of what we emphasize are more pathways and models that are somewhat content neutral. So we think about registered apprenticeship, we think about pathways through community colleges, we think about occupational skills training in community-based organizations. Those have always been our guidance in terms of like what we think about funding. And I think they hold true regardless of what the actual content of the training is. You know, we want to see more registered apprenticeship across the board, across all kinds of sectors. So specifically with environment, we're hoping to build on those planning sessions that we've been having. With arts and culture, I mean, I think this is something that Trin has led, and she could maybe speak to more, but we have been working pre-COVID. We worked with with UMass Dartmouth to put together a research project on career opportunities in the creative economy for Boston residents. So really thinking not just about you know, traditional arts and culture employers, but also really thinking about the creative economy type jobs that are embedded within larger organizations or embedded within, you know, the graphic designer who works for State Street, right? And then really mapping those back to career pathways that are offered, whether it's through BPS and their career and technical education, or whether it's again through our tuition-free community college initiative. So I think to a large extent, we hope to, you know, use some of these funds to advance those longstanding priorities. We also put in a request for funds to advance digital literacy, just seeing that is something that was critically important pre-pandemic. And, you know, obviously the last 14, 15 months have taught us that it's indispensable. So I agree, there's a lot of, you know, a conversation that might be happening in different places depending on kind of the content that people want to do, but that we would always point back to the importance of pathways and what those pathways should include. And we definitely are ready to work with any department to advance those.
Yeah, no, and then, yeah, the hard hit industries one seems like in some ways the hardest because a lot of I think some of it is an open question. You know, the hotel workers I know want their jobs back. They don't want retraining. So, you know, it's kind of like, that one's the one that seems the most like, okay, are we supporting workers transitioning, or are we just, you know, supporting these industries so they hire their people back, or what's going on there?
No, absolutely. And, you know, I think there's a lot of advocacy and organizing happening with, you know, whether it's hotel workers and their organizations or community-based organizations. And so hopefully that, you know, creates some opportunities that we can then come in and fund projects that do help people. We have worked closely with Best Hospitality, the Local 26 Training and Upgrade Fund, over the last year and a half to provide resources. We've done a number of sort of emergency grants to them to support their workforce. I think the other thing is, you know, they have relationships with job seekers. So they don't have to go out and sort of find people who want to engage in job training programs. They have a set of people who know about them, know about their services, and are likely to turn to them when they're looking to get back to work. So we like, you know, to prioritize investing in those because we want to make sure that our funds are being spent to serve Boston residents as quickly as possible. So they don't have to sort of start from zero. I think a lot of the hard hit industries pieces also may work with, you know, with small businesses as well, which is not an area where we do as much work because there's not necessarily as much like common threads across small employers. But when it comes to, you know, we work closely with Encore. We have a regular standing quarterly meeting with hiring managers at Encore and community-based organizations in Boston. So we are trying to follow all those conversations as they happen.
Yeah, great. And you guys have been involved, right? The thing that SOAR has been doing, the training program in April, May.
It's partially funded by the Neighborhood Jobs Trust. I don't think we've been as involved in the like program development, so to speak, but we have provided some resources for it.
And are you yet actively talking with, obviously SuccessLink on the YE side has, they have somebody coming in to do more evaluation. They've also got a grant for evaluation, but like one of the pieces there, right, is thinking about how those youth jobs, which are, you know, a taste for young people of what different things in the work world might be like how they turn into more like pipeline type opportunities. Are those conversations actively ongoing? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work closely with Alicia Sasser-Modestino, who is sort of the co-grantee with YEE for the evaluation. We have piloted a few sort of options. Last summer, we started our Learn and Earn program where students are paid an hourly wage to basically take a college class over the summer. And we've worked closely with BPS this year to really align that with their early college and dual enrollment programming. So we can say this is an opportunity for students who maybe don't have early college or dual enrollment in their college to get that experience during the summer and also earn a wage for it. So I think we're sort of constantly looking for how we can be complementary to those efforts. I'll also say that that is very much the conversation that the state has as well, just in terms of aligning to career pathways. That's the real big theme of the funding that we manage from the Commonwealth Corporation in the state of Massachusetts for summer jobs in Boston. So some of that is sort of happening from both sides, which is always nice. There's some synergy there.
That's good. No, and people loved the Learn and Earn thing last year and are happy you're continuing it. The only thing I've heard is why is it reduced from last year? And
yeah, I will say we served about 550 students last year. And just from a sort of program development point of view, I think it makes sense for us to really refine our model to make sure we're aligned with BPS, to make sure we're, for example, selecting courses that align to the early college pathways so that students kind of get that additional sort of benefit of being on that pathway. So we've really taken this year as an opportunity based on some of the evaluation that we did last summer to continue to refine the program model. And last summer, I will say the big push was make sure that we have opportunities for students that are fully remote. And so that was prioritized for very, very good reason. I think that was absolutely the right decision. And we're looking forward to, you know, maybe growing in a somewhat more controlled fashion over the next couple of years, as we want to make sure that students are, for example, passing their classes. It's somewhat counterproductive if students come and are assigned to a course and then don't pass. Then they're sort of starting their early college journey with a ding on their transcript. So sort of really figuring out how to provide the appropriate level of wraparound support for students so that they have a strong academic experience is also one of our big goals this summer.
Got it. And so how many students do we expect to serve in Learn and Earn compared to the 550?
We'll have 170. So that includes 20 students who are part of the Madison Park CTE dual enrollment program, and then 150 students who applied and were randomly selected into the program.
Got it. And what was the acceptance rate? Like how many did we turn away?
The application is actually still open. So we'll be sort of going through, they've extended the application a couple times. Last summer, I will say we had about 1,100 applications. And this summer, I think we had about 300 applications. So the number of applications went way down as well.
Right, but it's about double in each instance.
Yes, exactly. So maybe a 50% acceptance rate.
Okay. And one thing that I just would love to see OWD think about, and it's sort of like, this is like a triangle conversation between YEE, environment, and OWD, is like, we have these really great success link programs focused on green jobs that are like step one in a potential green job ladder, but they're very much the introductory level. It's like Green Team, Speak for the Trees, what Codman Square does, what the Emerald Necklace Conservancy does. Like, we've got these like that we're funding, right, for the summer, and they all, like, it feels very much like the lowest hanging fruit first step is to provide like a little bit of support and cohesion to that set of things, and think about how that set of things like grows into step two. And it feels like that's a space where OWD could be helpful in the interstitial kind of bit. So just
yeah, I agree. I think we need to identify what are the occupations that require some level of training and thus come with, you know, higher wages, better benefits, you know, that we can sort of be putting students on a training pathway toward. So I agree with that.
Great. And then a question that's for you and the Bpda, because everyone's sitting here wondering when I'll stop asking questions, just to Katie, and I've talked to John about this before, but I just want to put it on the record, kind of, you know, with both OWD and Bpda in the room, you know, I think both, certainly my district, certainly Councillor Flynn's district, probably Councillor Braden's district to some extent, like, you know, we're all seeing this huge growth in lab space, and I'm very, very antsy that as we create a bunch, like a noticeably higher percentage of Boston commercial real estate that is devoted to lab, that we have pipelines for our young people into jobs in those labs. And I recognize that there's a pipeline in the mix there that's a academic tertiary education pipeline to principal investigator, et cetera, right? Which isn't one that we're going to be able to, from an OWD side, do much on. But when I think about lab technicians, when I think about the whole kind of support world around a lab, and even, you know, lots of people I know have been lab techs and have then gone off to get their PhD in science, right? So it's not a totally unrelated space. It feels to me like the same way that we're like pushing environment on green jobs, like, oh my gosh, if we're gonna, with the carbon performance standards, create a whole demand for building retrofit, we, the city, should be on the cutting edge of thinking about how we get our young people into the work pipeline that we are creating, because shame on us if we don't figure out how to do that. It's like, here, obviously, we're more channeling a private sector thing, but we are channeling it with our sort of, you know, our planning and development decisions about lab space. And what I don't want, as somebody who, with a district that hosts many industries of which we are proud, but that hire too few of the young people who grow up in the area, you know, I've already got that in the world of the hospitals and the universities. And if we go into increasing commercial lab space and that's another space where that becomes too true, it worries me. So I just, and obviously what matters is that effective pipeline, the one that actually ends up with somebody with a job. So just really would love a little bit of an update on where OWD and Bpda are and thinking about this strategically. How do we align jobs trust plans with making a dent in this? Like, just if anybody could speak to that.
I mean, I absolutely agree. You know, there's explosion of potential lab jobs, and there's a dearth of the sort of like community-based training programs that we tend to support. There are a couple of really strong ones. Justice Start in Cambridge has a great lab technician training program that's historically been focused on pharmaceutical employers in Kendall Square. There's Mass BioEd just launched an apprenticeship program that is a paid apprenticeship program to train and different kind of lab roles. So I think these are exactly the kind of mid-skill, in-demand, good-paying career pathways that we should be thinking about. And once students get into employment at a large employer, have opportunity for advancement. So yeah, we will definitely be including life sciences and in our upcoming RFP. In general, the way we work is organizations and through investing in their programs. So we are very hopeful that we'll receive applications that speak to this need. And I think many of our job training partners are, you know, seeing the same headlines and seeing the writing on the wall that this is a space they should be moving into. So we're happy to sort of continue to participate in those conversations and hopefully have opportunities to invest in them moving forward.
Yeah.
I just want to add one quick thing to that, which is just a plug for our Plan Nubian Square community planning meeting coming up at the end of the month, where we're looking at parcel P3, where we know there's a lab interest from the real estate community. And we're talking about precisely, this is the focus of the meeting with the community, talking about the pathways between the potential jobs that are created from that type of development and the potential, the existing and then potential future pathways. Also thinking about Madison Park, Benjamin Franklin's move to Nubian Square, what potential future pathways might exist to connect residents of Boston, particularly Roxbury in that case, to laboratory uses if that indeed comes to pass.
No, that's great. I really think that, I mean, to your point, Katie, about our general model, like, I really think that cracking this in a transformative way that results in different outcomes is going to involve city leadership above and beyond us waiting for our ecosystem of partners to figure something out. Not because our ecosystem of partners is not excellent. I just think that it's always hard for people to build a model in a new space and hope that the public entity is going to fund it, right? It's just like that's a hard step. And you sort of inherently haven't hired the people to run that, like at the right, whatever it is that you're currently running is what you're getting funding for. And so I just think and I'm really glad to hear, Devin, that you guys are doing it on Plan Nubian. I mean, I just think we're living in a reality where like Longwood is extending down Brookline Ave. That's part of why we're doing the sort of like trying to be more coherent in our thinking about the development there in that section of Fenway. And then the entire Red Line corridor is becoming a lab corridor. And it's like, yeah, right now we're talking about Flynn's district in mind, but we will be in a serious way talking about 7 and 4, and we already kind of are, right? And like, it would be so easy for that conversion to happen at scale and us to have really like not figured out this piece. And then like all of our successors in 10 years will be like, well, didn't they see it?
Why didn't they do it? Yeah. No, Counselor, I'm not, I think we're definitely at kind of an inflection point here. I would definitely say when I think about getting to scale with sort of a new sector training, especially this one, our community colleges, Ben Franklin, are such important partners. And we really see our tuition-free community college initiative as one of the ways that we sort of support expansion into new sectors. We work closely with our partners to make sure that they understand that they can braid our funding sources so that they can propose a program that, you know, wraps together CDBG funding, NJT funding and potentially TFCC to create a pathway for students. So in some ways, we're sort of, working with the tools that we have to, but also developing new tools just in the expansion of TFCC. But, I think that the writing is definitely on the wall in terms of the expansion of life sciences. So yeah, it's a moment to jump on. I agree.
Yeah, and just to make sure that we have a results-oriented plan. Like, I think it's great for, when we're developing things for it to be like, okay, what was our achievement this year? Well, we supported Ben Franklin in creating this new set of courses, or like, they enrolled more people in these courses. That's fine, but those are all intermediate goals, right? At some point, the metric has to be, and this many Ben Franklin grads from this path got jobs in this thing. And I think I don't feel as a counselor that I see enough of that kind of data on workforce development, like the ways in which, and I'm sure some of it you have, and I just don't see, Katie, I feel like that, not what did we do, but what happened in terms of the core outcome we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, people are investing their time, energy, their limited time in a job training program for one reason, because they want a job. And so we're almost sort of making that implied promise to people that there will be a job on the other end. And we take that very seriously. A lot of our contracts are performance-based, so I'd be happy to sort of pull together some figures and share that. But we do definitely have to keep that employment. And we think about that a lot, the people who are, taking time away from their families, taking time away from their other paid employment to participate in a program. It's not because they want the experience of going through a job training program, it's because they want a better job. So I think that's the bottom line for our office as well.
Great. All right. Well, yeah, I would love if you pulled some stuff together for me on that. That would be awesome. Because I feel like I've got to, in all the conversations we're having about development on the Brookline Ave corridor in the lab space, I've got to really have a grasp on what we're going to do on the workforce development front to get comfortable with that. And then I think my last question, sorry, everyone, this is the dangerous thing. Commercial vacancies, it came up in our OED meeting that I think the OED folks are working with Bpda research and sort of looking at Google Analytics data and trying to get a better feel for where we have vacancies. And I'd just love to hear, because obviously, as we've frequently discussed with assessing, sort of the assessing records about what's vacant is often misleading because a landlord can lease something to themselves. There can be technically a lease on the books, but nobody's actually operating. So it doesn't perfectly match up with what our constituents experience, which is I have a lot of blank storefronts here. When are people coming back into it? And I'm especially interested in this because I think Councilor Mejia and I, and pretty much everybody on the council, is trying to think in this moment about how can part of the recovery be us designing programs that successfully incentivize moving, local, independent, small businesses owned by people of color, women, into vacancies. And it's one of the pieces of that is you have to kind of understand where your vacancies are in a data-driven way. So I know Alvaro's not on this call, but I'm a little bit curious, kind of if anybody can speak to that collaboration with OED, and when it sounded like some better, finer grained data on vacancies and economic activity was expected soon when we talked to them a week or two ago. So Michelle, you look like maybe you can.
I know that we're working on a memorandum of agreement to start to build a database. And I've been working with our research team to purchase more commercial data because, our previous sources, Remy and others, as we've monitored both the impact of the pandemic and the recovery, we are trying to gather more data, particularly around businesses. And so if I might have this connected with the wrong project, but if I'm thinking about the right matter, I believe we're going to our board in June to approve the MOA. And I know that we're working with Midori and OED to try to start building that. So I know Alvaro's deep in conversations with them, and we could certainly follow up if any additional information is needed.
Yeah, I would love follow up and just to be looped in and know what our timing is, because it seems to me like something that we should be, if we could figure out the right set of conditions so that you're genuinely making something happen that wouldn't be happening otherwise. Like, I think there's an opportunity for us to think about recovery funds in ways that are playing this matching game, and I think it's going to be driven by having better data. And so I'm sure that is the right matter, Michelle. I mean, it was Midori who was talking about it, and I suspect she's not working on 2 different MOAs for data on commercial stuff with you. So would love follow up on that. Great. Well, I think that's everything from me. And I'm just, before I go to public testimony, I just want to, if anybody from the agency wants to say a final word, and then also I didn't do this properly, so I just wanted to welcome Barry. Barry, I think this is your first time before the council. And we look forward to future ones being in person, but happy to see you here on the team. Yeah, so just wanted to say that. And if anyone from Bpda wants to say anything before I go to public testimony, now's your chance.
Just one clarification. I misspoke a little bit earlier regarding my linkage comments. Getting a little ahead of myself. What we're currently doing is looking at what an appropriate adjustment might be based on February 21 to July 21 timeline, given that we just increased linkage in February of this year. We'll be looking at linkage post-COVID with an updated study since the last study was in 2016. So just wanted to clarify that. I was not sufficiently detailed in my answer previously.
It's a good clarification. I was surprised by the alacrity with which we were proposing another increase.
I was getting ahead of myself. You know, AFFH, perfect.
Yeah.
Linkage, never perfect.
All right. Well, we will let Councilor Edwards know so that the time period is looking at that, and then yeah, I think we're all antsy on the council to think about another increase, but also mindful that there's a need to kind of figure out where the economy is actually at. Which has been a bit of a black box for everybody, just a rapidly shifting landscape, right? So, great. Anything else?
No, just thank you, Councilor, and to the other councilors, just for your continued collaboration, whether it be planning or development, our real estate shop, workforce development. We just really appreciate the continued collaboration with this body.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike, and thanks for being here. All right, and with that, we'll be moving to public testimony. So I'll be transferring folks into the room. I've got Tom Reddy and Sarah McCammond be up first. And then if you are watching this at home and you had wanted to testify and you aren't in the Zoom, now would be the time to quickly email ccc.wm@boston.gov and get the link. Because after we take these, we'll be closing out the hearing. And if you're giving public testimony, just state your name, your residence or affiliation, and then just share your comments with us. Mr. Reddy?
Thank you, Councilor. Tom Reddy. I live in South Boston in Councilor Flynn's district. I appreciate the time to make comments. I'd like to focus on 2 primary things. First and foremost is how do we reestablish or establish, depending upon your point of view, the public trust in the process that the Bpda uses to engage the community and to get meaningful community input. I think we're at an interesting juxtaposition as we come out of the pandemic and the emergency orders and in the virtual world that we're in today, to actually be able to jumpstart that. Right. I'm really interested in the email that was mentioned earlier in the hearing. Hopefully that's available somewhere so that everybody that participated in listening to the comments can read through that. It sounds like it's a very thoughtful and well-structured set of recommendations. Clearly, yeah, I personally would like to do that, but I'd like to see the Bpda and frankly the city. I think the councilors need to seriously consider how public engagement is gathered and meaningful input is considered. Because honestly, each agency does something different. It would be good for this, even though these comments are directed to the Bpda. So that would include things hybrid, clearly, in person and remote, at a location that supports that with appropriate language access. All of the things that have been talked about, but they have an opportunity to do this right. Part and parcel of that is the impact advisory groups. I know Councilor Mejia's had done some work in that space. Clearly, education on what an impact advisory group is knowledge about the process, understanding how that input is used, both at the public and for the IAG members. Clearly, that the overall engagement process needs to factor that in. So that's public engagement. Second point is just on the use of city-owned land. The BPDA owns most of the city-owned land from what I can see, and the opportunity that it creates to use it for city services, not just as a revenue source. I recognize the need to have a balanced budget, but parochially speaking, I think Councilor Flynn talked about this. There's a significant need for fire and EMS services in the neighborhood that I live in. There's land that's currently up for RFP for reuse consideration in the Flynn Park. We clearly would like to see that some of that land be considered for civic services. So thank you, Councilor.
Great, thank you so much, Tom. And I'm sure that we can, the email that was mentioned by Councilor Campbell is a public record, so I'm sure we can find that for you. Sarah McHammond, you're up next. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bach. My name is Sarah McHammond. I'm a Fort Point resident, and I'm also the Executive Director of the Harborfront Neighborhood Alliance. We bring together residents' voices in the neighborhoods from East Boston, Charlestown, North End, downtown, South Boston, Seaport, Fort Point, Water, and Dorchester, Port Norfolk, Columbia, Savin Hill neighborhoods to drive a community driven process for a sustainable and publicly accessible waterfront. And one of the things that we had talked about last year at this time was the community engagement during the pandemic. We are now coming out of that, and with that, the state of emergency will be lifted on June 15th, and we are curious to understand, since that was an allowed, remote meetings were an allowed use under that adjustment to open meeting law, how the BPDA will be conducting meetings going forward. We are also have advocated for having a very transparent process where people know who's in the room, they can chat, they can ask their questions, and running a Zoom webinar does not facilitate that in any way. So with that, it's a very much bottom-down teaching approach, and it does not bring together a high level and robust level of virtual engagement. And so we would like to advocate for Zoom meetings during a hybrid portion of in-person and digital platforms. The other thing that I'll just say really quickly, if I have a minute, is about life sciences. And we're seeing a lot of infiltration or proliferation of life sciences in residential communities, and the head house or the mechanical houses being 20 to 50 feet above zoning really has an impact on the character of our neighborhoods. And we would like to see that zoning be adjusted, or for the height to include a cap or somehow limit those mechanical houses. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for those comments, Sarah. And yes, and I think we're all thinking that the virtual to hybrid, et cetera, transition it's going to be a work in progress, and it needs to be figured out well and in a way that maximizes, engagement in that sense of people being able to relate to each other. So appreciate those comments, and hope the BPDA will take them back as well. All right, I think that's everybody who we have here for public comment. And so nothing remains except for me to say that this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee is adjourned. Thank you all. And thank you for your patience with our technical difficulties earlier.
Thank you, Councilor.